webinar, and we are going to record this so other people who weren't able to join us could listen to it and learn and get some tips. My name is Anna Nath, and I am a third-year grad funder at this point, and I am a PhD candidate in the Department of History. So it is my pleasure to do this today. And Nama?
And I'm Nama Shalom, and I'm a first-year grad funder and a PhD candidate in education.
And Nama, and it is recording, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so today's webinar is about writing a personal statement. A lot of students think this is going to be the easiest thing to do, and then they face sort of the real task of writing a personal statement for a fellowship application, and it's never as easy as it appears. So hopefully today we're going to help you think about what it should be, what questions to ask yourself, etc. So the outline for today is I'm going to go over a little bit of sort of what you should do before you begin writing, a little bit of help with the funder reminders, how to understand what the funder's mission is before you actually start writing for them. I'll show you just the typical application components. Again, everybody might have very different fellowships in mind, and the application package can vary, but there are some typical components for all. And then we'll talk about the personal statement, different forms it can come in, and questions to ask yourself before you sort of as you write it. And then some tips and tricks on how to craft a personal statement, how to make it effective, etc. And as always, we'll finish with Q&A. You are welcome to put your questions in the chat as I go along, and then Naoma can answer, or we can discuss sort of in the presentation, whichever way it might work better. So before you begin writing a personal statement, getting to know your funder is so very important. If you've had appointments with us at Grad Fund, if you've been to any of our webinars or any of our mentoring programs, summer or spring, you'll know we talk about getting to know your funder quite a bit. And that's because you really can't write a successful application if you don't understand what the funder wants, right? Majority of these funders are out there to support and give money to graduate students, but they also have their own mission. They have their own goals. They're different. That could be government agencies. They could be nonprofits. They could be philanthropic organizations, et cetera. So it's important to understand, what does your funder actually want? It's important to look at the profiles of past award recipients. That information is public. That information can usually be found quite easily on the funder's website. And it is extremely helpful. It's very, very educational to just see what, sometimes you'll have snippets of the projects that the funder is sponsoring. You'll know the disciplines that people are coming from, and just sort of how they're presenting themselves in their projects. Really important to know, what is the review process, right? Who is reviewing your application? Are you writing for multidisciplinary audience, which majority of the fellowship applications are? Is there, like with Fulbright, for example, is there some sort of component of the host country review? Is my application being read by perhaps people who don't have anything to do with academia, et cetera? Because the answers to those questions will change the way you approach your application. It will change the way, the language you want to use, et cetera. And of course, it's good to know, is there contact information for program officer? And it's usually very easily accessible on the website. It is the job of the program officer to answer all the questions that the students have. It's what they do. So never hesitate to ask your questions, right? Whether it's about formatting, whether it's about, is my project, is my project the way I'm stating it interesting to this organization, et cetera. So definitely have the contact information for the program officer handy, and don't hesitate to contact them with your questions. The major review components of any fellowship applications are basically the intellectual merit of the applicant and the project, right? And the applicant's broader impact. So for this particular, because we're talking about the personal statement, it's about the applicant, right? So the intellectual merit of an applicant and an applicant's broader impacts. And as I go on, you'll understand better what I mean. But I wanted to highlight those two sections because sometimes it helps to sort of put your thoughts into those categories. This language is from the National Science Foundation, but it is applicable across the board. They're looking at your intellectual capacity for the project, your intellectual capacity as a researcher, and then, of course, what impact you're going to bring to the larger world, right? Because again, this is not just academia. This is bigger than your project. This is bigger than your dissertation, et cetera. So what is intellectual merit, right? So it is evidence of your potential to advance knowledge. Pretty simple, right? And it is the ability to plan and conduct research, work as a member of a team, as well as work independently, interpret and communicate your research, right? Take initiative, solve problems, persist. These are sort of things that you're going, what does it mean to have intellectual merit as an applicant? Because again, we're talking about the personal statement. That's where you talk about yourself, right? It is a personal statement. So these are kind of things to think about. How do I show my intellectual merit? Of course, it's demonstrated intellectual ability. So your grades, your curricula, awards, publications, presentations, they will be part of the application itself. So that helps, of course, to show your intellectual merit. And again, remember that your intellectual merit is different, the way you sort of put it on paper, the way you present yourself, from your researcher's intellectual merit. That's going to be covered in your proposal, right? Or proposal statement or research statement or whatever different terminology could be used for that particular essay. But again, this is different. The same sort of broad review criteria will be applied to your research. But because we're talking about the personal statement today, this is about your intellectual merit. And that will be different from the intellectual merit of your research. Broader impacts is often a difficult category across the board because you do have to think bigger than sort of your department, bigger than academia, bigger than I want to finish my dissertation, right? Broader impacts is the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal outcome, right? Whatever that is. And it could be whether it is, whether you're thinking about the Mellon Foundation, the Andrew Mellon Foundation, a big humanities funder, right? And their sort of interest in promoting the importance of humanities, dealing with big humanities questions for the society at large. So that's kind of what you're thinking about broader impacts when you're thinking outside of sort of the discipline. But again, here, because we're talking about a personal statement, this is about you. How are you going to benefit society in the future, right? It could be research itself. It could be activities directly related to the research. It could be activities supported and complementary, but it is sort of your plans, right? What are you going to do after you graduate? Are you going to teach? Are you going to, solve bigger problems? Where your passions lie, right? So this is again very important. The potential impact of the individual you on society and the potential impact of your research on society. Those are two different things. Again, they're both extremely important. So again, this is kind of the big broad categories of how to begin thinking about different review criteria. And again, we're talking about the personal statement. Once again, some examples of broader impacts, right? If you're saying, I want to teach or I want to bring this knowledge to larger society, it could be increasing participation of underrepresented groups. It could be outreach, mentoring, improving STEM education in schools. whatever it could be, including increasing public scientific literacy, right? Increasing public engagement with STEM, community outreach. It could be science clubs, radio, TV, newspaper, blogs. Again, depending on sort of where you are and who you are and what discipline you're coming from, right? These categories, it could be many different things. But again, thinking about that larger potential of broader impacts of yourself later on. Maybe it's diverse, globally competitive workforce. Maybe it is increasing collaboration between academia, industry, and something else. Again, sort of begin thinking about what it is that you're trying to achieve later on. So the application. The typical components will have a research statement or a proposal, whichever way it's named, but this is basically a statement about your research project. It will have a personal statement. It might be called something else. Again, it could be wrapped into a bigger sort of essay question, but there's always some sort of component of a personal statement in the application. Transcripts, of course, a CV, letters of recommendation, and you could be asked for a budget. Again, not everybody does it, but a lot of fellowships will ask you sort of for a budget. So these are typical components. Of course, today we're talking about the personal statement. So there are two common scenarios out there. There could be two separate statements, which is a personal statement and a statement of previous research. Again, note it's not the statement of your research that you're submitting for a fellowship, but it's sort of the stuff you've done previously. Again, sort of showcasing your ability to do the research that you're posing by saying what you've done before, right? So there could be two separate statements for those things, or it could be one statement that responds to both questions. So when you're parsing through the application requirements, it's important to understand what exactly you're being asked, right? What form are they asking for? And it's also important to look whether there are additional narrative questions that sometimes are being asked as part of the application, and you might have some personal statement-like questions there as well. So just understanding kind of in which scenario your particular fellowship application will fall is a great starting point. There is much variability when it comes to personal statement. Some award applications may not require what's called a personal statement, right? It might not be out there saying a personal statement is required, but comparable information could be requested somewhere else. Like I said, it was in the application form, especially as applications went online, right? And now we don't send anything anywhere, but it has become much easier to sort of embed certain questions as narratives within the application itself. And often students sort of leave it to the last minute because they think, well, you know, those narratives are easy. But it's not. It is really important information. Sometimes they will ask for 2,000 characters, and those are pretty hefty answers that you have to think through and work through. So don't think one part is sort of more significant just because you're not seeing the title personal statement. Don't assume you don't have to write one, and to sort of go through the application components right away to figure out what are you going to be required to do, as well as application itself. And I guess to begin thinking about it, again, you know, it's not easy, right? A personal statement. What am I going to talk about? How do I talk about myself? But these are some questions that we think are helpful, right? Think about what could be special, unique, distinctive, impressive about your life story, right? And again, that's for everyone, but just kind of think about it. And maybe you think that, well, my life is nothing special, but just think, you know, are there certain aspects of it that are perhaps different, something that you could, that is worth talking about? What details about your life might help the reviewers better understand you or set you apart from other applicants? again, everybody has a different life story. We all come from different backgrounds. We come from different disciplines, and our ways into our disciplines sometimes are winding and different, right? So again, sort of give a thought to this question. How did you become interested in this field, and what have you learned about it and about yourself that has convinced you that you are well suited to this field? Again, this is sort of an introspective question, right? It's a great question to think about before you sort of embark on this, on writing this essay, because this is about you. So thinking about, how did I even become interested in this field? Why am I doing this, right? Will help you process this, and will help you hopefully put it in a better form on a piece of paper, to make the reviewers feel your commitment to the discipline, your excitement, and sort of, again, your preparedness for the project ahead. And how, again, sort of some of this might seem pretty straightforward, but sometimes we don't think that the simple questions or straightforward questions are worth asking, but they are. How did you learn about your field, right? Did you just did you just stumble upon it one time? Did you, was that an accident, as one student was telling me today, right? Sort of, how did you come to be interested in what you do? What reasons can you give for reviewers to be interested in your application, right? Again, is there something special about your journey or about your persona that could make them more invested in your application? How have you capitalized on opportunities available to you, right? This is more similar, sort of the life story or a path to this point in your life, to being a PhD student, right? Were there sort of opportunities you took along the way? Did you take any detours? Was that, did you have to come through some obstacles, etc.? So this is kind of, again, thinking about getting to this moment in your life, this PhD, and applying for this fellowship. And what impact have you had on your academic, local, and broader community? Perhaps you've already been involved for years with Boys and Girls Clubs, or teaching STEM at your local school, or mentoring, newly admitted undergraduates, perhaps working with underrepresented minorities in certain fields at your department, et cetera. So this could be, again, think broadly about this question, because again, the reviewers want to understand who you are, where you're coming from, and sort of where you plan to go. So this was about kind of thinking, again, the first questions to ask, where the personal statement goes. So now we're going to talk about crafting the text. How do you, now that you have these answers in your head and you have a story to tell, how do you actually put it on paper? So general tips, the personal statement, tell a story about yourself, right? Craft a narrative arc that links your essays together. The various part of the applications have to talk to each other. Think about them as everyone gives you an opportunity to showcase a bit of a different side of you, right? Whether it's here, it's a personal side. In a proposal, it's going to be your sort of academic side. The transcripts are going to show something else, et cetera. So think about, is there something, is there a narrative that connects the two? Do I see any sort of can I tie them together? But remember that the story you tell about yourself is not a biography. It's an intellectual biography, right? This is different from, an essay about you that you maybe wrote in school, or etc. This is also different from the grad school application essays that you guys wrote, because you're already in grad school. They expect more from you. They expect that you understand yourself better. There's more steps that have been taken since you wrote the admissions a letter, right? So kind of think about that as well. Show commitment to goals and mission of funder, right? In all of your writing pieces, in a personal statement as well, think about how to connect your story, right, and your goals for the future to the mission of the funder. And that's why I began by sort of, again, talking about how important it is understanding the mission of your funder. And here, a simple example could be you've read that the mission of National Science Foundation, for example, is to have more women in STEM fields, to have community outreach with scientific information, to teach sort of community to understand better and be involved in scientific sort of conversations, right? It could be multiple things that you found on the website of the National Science Foundation. And then when you're writing your story, you're thinking to yourself, oh, great, I have mentored, I ran a science club at the local high school for the past, 4 years. So that I could put that into my personal statement, and that echoes and ties to the mission of the funder, right? It showcases you, it's about you, but it also ties very well to the mission of the funder. So that's kind of how you think about that and how to tie these things together. Another important characteristic of the personal statement, and again, because often it is connected to the previous sort of, it's intellectual biography, like I said. So it's your previous research, sort of how you got to this point in your life. So it needs to demonstrate your preparation for the work ahead, right? Not necessarily in terms of, again, as you sort of talking about what you've done and what your skills are, right? You were talking about what does that mean for the project you're proposing, right? How is it going to help? Perhaps you are proposing to go and do research in a really remote area, right? And maybe you worked as, as a guide through some mountains a few years ago, right? For several summers in a row. So again, you see, in essence, those two things, it's not really about your research in that sense, but it is about your personal preparedness, right? So you're prepared to sort of undertake that 9-month research in a remote area somewhere because you can show that you've done those things. You have these experiences, which makes you a good candidate for this fellowship. And make clear how a word will help facilitate your future goals. Right, we talked about sort of showcasing your future goals, what you plan to do with sort of that broad outreach and sort of your future plans. It's important for funders to feel and to know that their award will mean something, right? It will help you get to your goals. It will help you achieve whatever it is that you said you wanted to achieve. So very important also to, usually students conclude with saying how a certain award is going to help them get to whatever it is that they set out. Key distinctions for, again, very, very important for the personal statement when you write it for a fellowship application, right? Place focus you as a researcher and junior scholar. This is not your biography. I was born such and such date in such and such place. I went to school. This is not the type of essay. It is intellectual biography. The focus is on you as a researcher and a junior scholar with everything that comes with it. And like I said, be very mindful of differences from graduate school admission essays. Often students are tempted to use those in place of their personal statement, but it doesn't it doesn't work. Much more is expected from you as you are admitted, you are in your program, you have done some, you have engaged with classes. Even if you're just starting out, you're a different person. And they want that reflected. And avoid list-like essays that duplicate CV. That's a difficult one, especially when I've just told you it needs to demonstrate your preparedness for the project that you're proposing. But it is sort of thinking about how to select moments from your life that you want to highlight, a story, an experience that you want to highlight, but it needs to be purposeful. So if you just give a narrative about, well, I did this and I worked in this lab in the summer, and so now I have this skill, that's good. But again, think about, not every experience needs to be there, because they have a CV for that, right? So remember, they do have a CV and you don't want to duplicate. What you do want to do is draw their attention to something meaningful, something that was perhaps transformative for you, but also really important for the project at hand. Remember, they're sponsoring a project or they're funding a project in most cases. And so it's really important to connect those two. And they need to see that you, as a junior scholar researcher, are prepared for the project at hand. And that's the purpose of the personal statement. But again, we can talk a little bit more about, if you have any questions about sort of this CV versus personal statement when you talk about some points from that. Style and organization. Use active voice to emphasize your experiences, strengths, and initiative. We can't overstate that enough. Active voice makes a load of difference in your writing. It shows you as a strong, but clear. Your writing comes through clearer. There's no confusion as who does what. If you say, this work was done at this lab, the reviewer doesn't know. Did you do the work? Did somebody else do the work? So it's really important to keep your voice active when you write. Avoid overly lengthy paragraphs, and be intentional about your use of topic sentences. This could seem very easy, right? Very straightforward. But this is something that you should keep in mind, because again, lengthy paragraphs, the reviewers can get lost in them. And then good topic sentences will help you guide the reader through your essays, through your application process. It's important to remember, right, that when your advisor reads it, us here at GradFund, when we read your application materials, sometimes we will read intentionally more slowly. We will read it sometimes a couple times to figure out what you're talking about, right? But the reviewers are not going to give you that time. They don't. They have a ton of applications to get through, and they give it a one read. And if something is unclear, or if something they had to sort of fill in the blank for themselves, they will. The good topic sentences then will help lead them, right? So you are in charge and you're kind of leading them through your writing. And it just turns out to be a very effective, if people might think is easy, but it is a very, very effective technique in writing fellowship applications. So again, avoid lengthy paragraphs. Think about your reader, think about, how much time they have, and don't bury important points in the middle of those lengthy paragraphs, because they might skim the middle section, right? And they might never see what you really wanted them to see. Again, sort of common questions to ask if you're stuck and you're just kind of trying again to figure out where to start. What challenges have you overcome, right? How did you become interested in your research topic? Those are just sort of, I think the second one is this foundational, right? We all need to answer that question before we begin writing anything about it, right? How did I come to be interested in this research topic? And very important, why did you choose Rutgers, right? The fellowship the reviewers from this fellowship applications, right? They want to see that you are at a place that will support your research and that you're at the place that fits well with your research interest. So highlight Rutgers, right? Like highlight why you're at your department and you chose Rutgers for your research. Are there specific labs that are available here, perhaps? Are there specific advisors that you came to work with who works on your specific area of interest, right? How is Rutgers supporting you, and how sort of this, because it gives the funder this feeling that you will get this done, that this project is well supported, that intellectually, right, that there is an intellectual support for this project in your department at this university. So remember that that's also an important question to consider for anyone writing fellowship applications. What methodological training or experience do you have, right? And then that, again, that goes to being prepared for the project that you're proposing. Am I trained in these methods? Am I, are these methods kind of innovative? Am I well prepared for this? What are the broader impacts of your work? Again, we've talked about that, right? Super important to think, why am I doing this? What is this going to do for the better of the world, right? For the bigger society, etc. And what are your post-PhD plans? They don't have to be incredibly specific. You might not know, right? And they understand that. But what they want to see is this sort of this introspection, is you thinking about your plans and sort of kind of showing, you want to teach, do you want to work in an industry, do you want to create some sort of bridge between academia and industry, do you want to, etc., right? Do you want to continue researching, do you want to work on, I don't know, cancer cure, etc. So just kind of thinking about what your post-PhD plans are, also really important question to address. And then finally, it's just kind of, how do you introduce a personal statement, right? Students often struggle with that, right? So now you thought about all your answers, you thought about these questions, and like, okay, but how do I start? And often, people tell a story. A short vignette can sometimes be effective, no doubt, but keep it relevant and brief, right? So if you're talking, remember, if the funder is funding you, so if you're talking about a small, a story, and you started your personal statement with the story has to be about you. It can't be about your parent. It can't be about your advisor. It can't be about something else, even if those were really important events or really important people in your life. But the story has to be about you. So keep it relevant and keep it brief. Remember, the personal statements are short, right? All essays, all stuff that you're writing for, everything that you're writing for in the fellowship application is going to be much shorter than your dissertation proposals, that your, et cetera. So thinking about space, right? How do I effectively use, the 2 pages, for example, that I'm given for a personal statement, or 1 page that I'm given for a personal statement, which is often the case, right? And in a story, that every word has to matter. Everything that you're putting on that piece of paper has to matter. It has to be purposeful. So keep it thinking about whether it's, relevant, and keeping it brief. A lot can be said with 1 sentence. Often you don't need to write an entire paragraph to make a good important point. Keep in mind your narrative arc and overall theme, right? So when you're introducing a personal statement, if you have that narrative arc in mind, right? So begin with, begin sort of showcasing it. If you're going to, go from this point in your career to this point in the personal statement, again, sort of begin showing it. And then also begin to show fit with the funder's mission and goals straight in the personal statement. It's important to make that connection right away. It's important to make that strong connection, because again, the fit matters. The fit with the funder's mission and goals is extremely, extremely important. And establish your graduate study and longer term goals is the point of focus, right? Don't wait till the very end to say what discipline you're coming from. They're not there to try to figure it out for themselves, right? Put it all out there, make it clear, show who you are, where you're coming from, and sort of what your long-term goals are, and make focus on that. So the reviewer can focus on that. So you can actually sort of give them everything at the very beginning, and then you expand on those things.